we ourselves are in a finite experience. And so that core eternal nature belongs to our soul. And then from there, the multidimensional aspect of that becomes that we are part of even a larger consciousness, or one could say an oversoul.
When did you first start to percolate that idea that there is even a natural law that all universal beings and planets and galaxies operate on?
There are many mainstays in esoterica, and natural law is by far one of them, because natural law is the first expression of the law of one. So the law of one, you could look at, it has many different layers to it, but the first manifestation of the law of one is natural law.
Sarah, Elkhaldy, welcome back on Just Tap In. Instead of asking you what you're most excited about, I wanted to start off a little bit differently today and ask you, what is the most important mystery teaching of our current time that you're excited about?
The most important, I would say, is Eros Gamos, ad infinitum. It is the most timeless teaching, and the one that is preserved in the most esoteric levels of each age. So I shall not thwart that tradition.
Wow. I mean, I've heard the term Eros before, but I'd love to get an overview from you about why that teaching has been so prevalent for you and through all ages, for that matter.
Because it is the antidote to spiritual amnesia. I find usefulness in all experiences and in all levels of consciousness. I don't feel like there is nothing to be gained and to be valued for our own expansion and our own soul's evolution, and that's why we're here. But once we've had enough of that, we realize that it is suffering to live in division and polarity consciousness. And that those different degrees of suffering get, very intense. And so then we have that higher calling to somehow be of service to others, or service to all in some cases. And that would be unifying. That would be coming out of spiritual amnesia, out of that divisional state that causes so much fragmentation and therefore so much suffering. And that's what we know also in this age is just separation consciousness. And so the antidote to that is Eros Gamos. It's that inner unification that leads to us, even if we weren't trying to, that inner unification will lead to emerging with our higher self.
I mean, the term amnesia implies that we forgot something. And I'm curious to know what you feel is that missing piece that not only we forgot, but we are starting to remember through that inner unification within ourselves.
We start to remember that we are eternal and that we are both the fractal and the fragment of source. So we are source at that highest level. And then we go into, different fractals of source. So we go into different unique expressions of source and we explore our uniqueness and our perceptions. But that core amnesia is around the fact that we are eternal and essentially sovereign beings. So what that means is that the soul itself has sovereignty even over our whole experience. And so once again, it's fun to explore separation consciousness, because I even talk about this in my poetry, what a great way to get the relief of everything, all of our eternalness at rest. Wouldn't that be like a vacation at some point? Wouldn't that amnesia, not always need to be a negative thing? if that was wanted for certain experiences. So it can almost be a vacation from God. It could be our vacation from Big Source. It's to go create these limitations, which we can grow through and then eventually expand beyond. But that amnesia is also, taking different forms, like I said, of suffering. And so because of that, the amnesia's antidote would be that remembrance to the fact that we are eternal, we are sovereign beings, and that we are all one.
And I mean, eternity and eternal also bridges really deeply with the concept of multidimensionality, that we're operating also in these parallel infinite timelines or selves multidimensionally. How would you break that down on a simple level for people of what it really means to remember our eternity, and that we're also operating in this infinity space-time continuum, not just in these physical bodies right now, but there's almost like more to that as well?
Yeah. Thank you for helping ground that concept, because we ourselves, we ourselves are in a finite experience. And so that core eternal nature belongs to our soul. And then from there, the multidimensional aspect of that becomes that we are part of even a larger consciousness, or one could say an oversoul. And so because of that, what multidimensional means is really being able to not just expand our consciousness, but as I talk about the upgrades, expand our body, mind, spirit, so that we have the bandwidth, just like almost our meridians can serve as fiber optics. And that's what will make us not go ungrounded or not explode. So it's not just about the consciousness being expanded into the fact that we are more than just this singularity, this single person and our single consciousness, but also the framework within the body mind to receive that. The bandwidth is what I call it, or the upgrades to receive that. So that's really important too in this age, because we're learning about embodiment, right? And we're unifying that chasm between the mind and the body in this age. And that's why we hear so much about integration. But when we're integrating multidimensional consciousness, what that's happening is at a body, mind, spirit level, we are merging with our higher self, and then from there our oversoul. So we're merging with our higher expressions, because I'm sure you know that there's more than one sphere that we exist in. So it really depends on, multidimensionality can mean one of those levels of our consciousness that are higher than us, or it can mean the level beyond that one or beyond that one, just depending on our own journey. But it gets a little weird, because we break out of whatever the confines of our ego, our self-concept, our personality is, when we're literally expanding to meet more of our higher consciousness, our multidimensional consciousness. It's multidimensional for a reason. It doesn't have just one dimensional expression of it. And so that's one of the things that is really interesting in this age, is watching that merge happen. It's fun, but it's also kind of awkward. You have to go into non-judgment sometimes, even just to expand. It's okay, all right, more of my consciousness is coming through, and this is how it is.
Also, one of the ways it plays out is, you've said that it is more natural in this age to have come from lifetimes of mastery. The things we have already mastered in past lives play a heavy role in determining our curriculum in this life, or for this life. Bringing that factor in there, lifetimes of mastery, and that awkward stage that you say we're going through, how do we navigate, remembering these lifetimes of mastery where we were these master alchemists, for example, that knew all these things about reality and could move things with our mind and can do all these extraordinary things. and then going through the awkward stage of almost merging different realities while we're in that, denser realities with higher consciousness as well. I don't know. It's a loaded question in there, Sarah, but I know you can handle it.
I was actually following you the whole time.
Yeah, I know.
You're speaking my language. So we go with the energies of an age, right? Because in past ages, there was a lot of differentiation, don't get me wrong. It's not like we only had one path we could take in each age, but there were still overall themes in each age because of the energies. And so why I'm bringing that up is because in past ages, some of the paths, I'll give an example, are that monks would take an oath of silence. Or they would be master meditators in a specific lineage, because there's so many different forms of meditation. They could have mastered a specific lineage. They could have even already had ascended because they mastered literally leaving the body. That's what we're discovering this age too, that all these like more Eastern traditions had, it was more common for them to just levitate and peace out. And so we can master that in maybe one age because the energies of that age were really focused around learning those themes. And that's why it makes no sense to necessarily bash, but to widen our consciousness into integrating them. Because that could have been just like we learn something. We don't start off just knowing everything. We learn something and we develop it. And so those things that I consider now like the old age of spirituality, they still, we're building on those. So it's not like they were wrong. It's just that we're learning how to now bring them into the emotional body, which is the spirit of this age. That's why we hear the rise of the divine feminine. It's because the feminine aspect is way more nonlinear, is way harder to pinpoint. It's not just one thing, but one of the largest expressions is the will. And I'll say this another way. It's the will, but it's also the emotional body. It's also the nonlinear consciousness. So we're really allowing that to get the spotlight in the energies of this age. But that's going on with a few other things. So now I'm going to just make this super condensed. In past ages, we learned how to master the mind, and we learned all of the powers of the mind. And now in this age, we're learning how to be a body, and it doesn't look as graceful. And so now we're learning about authenticity. Why? Because that's another way of saying unconditional love. Unconditional love is not different. Maybe in the perception where we're still figuring out division, it looks different, but it just means an unconditioned state. That's what unconditional love is. It's not conditioned. You have no conditions. So it's authenticity. No conditions. It's not like, oh, I have a condition. I can't present that. I can't express that. So these are different terms for the same thing. And so I just stick with transparency because transparency is still a new term. So people can't calcify into it yet. I try to use new terms so that we're shifting the perception and we see things from a fresh way rather than just repeat things until they become no desensitized to them. So in this age, what we're really learning is to be master falling on our sword. We're learning to beautifully fall off our own. That saying, like you get up on the horse and you fall off again. You get up on the horse and you fall off again. We're learning how to fall gracefully off of the horse because that's building up the feminine, the rise of the divine feminine within the hemispheres of our energy field.
Our world is shifting faster than ever, and it's so easy to feel small in the middle of all of this. Imagine being part of a movement, a tribe that is not just talking about the change, but actually living it. That's why I created The Deep Dive, a living spiritual ecosystem where every single day we go on a journey to remembering our most authentic self. Our members have joined from all walks of their awakening, and it's been such a blessing to witness all of the soul relationships that are already forming. As a community, we start every day with simple, powerful activities, and we're beginning to start envisioning the kind of world that we want to experience. This is way more than exclusive content or just another spiritual Netflix. This is about integration and leaving behind a legacy. If you're ready to move beyond knowing into becoming, then visit the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen right now to learn more. I'd be honored to co-create history with you. What's really tied in there, because you brought up the word gracefully, and when I was listening in your new series on Gaia, Mystery Teachings, you talk about on episode 4 actually the ascension cycles that humanity goes through, and these are higher timelines that we go through where the veils are thinner in a sense. And you talk about how the universe does give us these grace periods, time for increased awareness, that I believe in, and I think that's what you're referring to, what we're in right now. So that period of grace, I'd love to understand from a universal perspective why a species that's going through an evolutionary leap is given a period of grace, and how can we land into that, knowing that, it doesn't have to be perfect, the ascension process right now, because the universe is like, okay, like I'm going to give you some time to really understand what's going on and have awareness around it.
Yeah. So the grace period that I was mentioning is simply in physics, I'm sure there's a way of presenting this term, but in spirituality, I view it as an alchemical process of separating to reunify at a higher level. And that's what purification really is. Because if you look at anything within physics, within nature, something gets purified through going through like a spiral process, right? even clothes, right? In a washer, it's like, why are they going like that? So like things get purified through
Good metaphor.
That movement. Yeah. And so what that does is that separates something. So you're separating, let's say in this case, lower consciousness or the dross. That's what we would call it in alchemy. You're always separating the dross. It's no chill, right? So if something is no longer serving us, there is that compassionate self-inquiry. But at the end of the day, these are things that are like the essence of what is not our truest essence, put it that way. And so it's just considered like a purification process of the dross, so to speak, or that lower consciousness. And so through that movement of solve et coagula, or to separate, to reunify again, or recombined, that's what I'm also calling in that setting as a grace period, but that's because we have free will. So another way of saying all of this is that there are different influences on this playing field called Earth. And those different influences won't just all happen, even though they have a rhythm, they have like a pendulum swing of power, let's call it, that the trends take over and what have you. There's still these strong influential forces that can help people or can test people in some cases. And that's because we have free will. And so what we're doing in this time period right now is allowing more of those catalysts, allowing more of those forces to help people, because we're in between realms. Some of us are very solidly placed in the higher frequencies. Some of us are very solidly placed in the lower frequencies. But then in between, you have a lot of this melting pot. You have these higher and lower influences, and they're acting upon people that are in between realms. They're in between. And so nothing's actually wrong, because a process wouldn't go, oh, it perfectly splits. So this is still all a part of the evolutionary process. Even what I'm describing as a grace period is still a part of it. And so what people are really doing right now is having stronger lessons, a stronger curriculum, so that they can activate that higher mind, that higher consciousness, or even just that heart-centered consciousness through stronger, let's say, inspirations. We might have things show up inside the external world that might look one way, but really it could be the largest grace if it's helping activate something within us or catalyze something within us that just was not catalyzed before. And so that's why I would consider it like a grace period. It's really also seen as like a disillusionment period, which is also alchemical. Disillusionment is one of the steps in alchemy as well.
Another term that you use for these moments is rites of passage. And I was really drawn to when you first used that term, or when I first heard you use that term, because it's sort of like, in a story, a character has to go through this rite of passage, or it's almost like a hero's journey. How do you view some of those, I guess, most prevalent rites of passage that people might be going through individually, but also collectively as a mirror to what's actually going on in this? The image I got for it was like a bell curve. You have the people that are going toward that 5D, 3D, but then, most of everyone is in that in-between state in the middle of the bell curve. So what are those rites of passages that are maybe introducing us to the door of the higher densities as well?
The good news is that people, many beings, especially people tuning into this episode, they hold that higher frequency strongly, not like oscillating anymore in between. And it's okay even if they do, but they hold that higher frequency. What that does is, I'm trying to think of a different example, but I'll go with what I'm given. It's like how a mother bird chews the food so that it can already have it in a digestible form to others. There's these like streams. And so because of that, we are broadcasting things to help people through their rites of passage so that it's easier, not in a way where it robs somebody of their lessons, but that it's easier for people because the energies are primed. And so those rites of passage are hard to communicate because you can say things with words as much as you can, but really those are just the seeds that are planted. And that eventually what needs to happen, which is the strongest and the first, I would say, rite of passage, is that a person has to really understand at a visceral level, natural law. And so what they will get tested with, and then that moves on from there. I would say that's the first initiation. So sometimes in the age, we love to kind of like pendulum swing a concept. So we go, there's tests. And then we go, there's no test. The universe isn't testing you because you always grow from that. You always grow from that dialect. That's how growth produces. You have something say something, then somebody say the opposite, but then that births something else. So a rite of passage gets played out through tests. And so on one hand, a person could philosophize, there's no such thing as tests. You're testing yourself. But actually the universe, in order for us to mature, puts us through tests. And those tests lead to either initiation, or what you said earlier, the heroes call it, be like answering the call, or it would be not. And, that always gets another try. So, but what those tests are that lead to the first rite of passage is being able to really see what a hive mind, what a group think is, and then to see through it. And so that's many of the lessons that some people are going through, not everyone. Some people already are past that. But that will be the first rite of passage because a person is being taught at that point what natural law is. And for natural law to be embodied within a person, they need to be put through tests of having to go, oh, wait, no, I don't agree. This is wrong, or this is right. So they need to birth that individuation process.
When did you first touch on that there was a natural law existing in the universe? Because it's not like we're giving a handbook when we're coming in here, be like, these are the three key principles that you're supposed to follow because the universe operates that way? Was it through observing nature? Was it through just your own internal meditations, contemplations? When did you first start to like percolate that idea that there is even a natural law that all universal beings and planets and galaxies operate on?
So I had already came in with natural law. That's not something I need to master. I still have my own things to master, and I'm always growing and I'm always being humbled. But natural law was something that is just innate within me. And so when I found mystery school teachings about natural law, I went, oh yeah, so people know about this? Because like in my head, I've always been reverse engineering things, right? Like I was like, wait, if an apple goes up in the air, this was like me in high school, acting like a stoner. I was like, wait, if an apple goes up in the air and it comes down, then that doesn't just mean that that's for an apple. That is a law. And so this was before I even like knew these things. So like I had already been my whole life exploring these things. And then I would go and give myself like these like logical formulas. And I go, oh, if that is that, then that. So I had already been like in this. And so when I came across mystery school teachings that were teaching these things, there were nothing that I had to be sold on or believe. I went, oh, okay, I don't need to write a book on this because people already figured this out.
You resonated it somehow.
Yeah.
Remembered it.
Yeah. And so to answer your question, even though I did come in with that already, it's prevalent. There are many like mainstays in esoterica, and natural law is by far one of them, because natural law is the first expression of the law of one. So the law of one, you could look at, it has many different layers to it. But the first manifestation of the law of one is natural law. And so because of that, even if it's not called natural law, it will be in any esoteric system. For instance, the first from this age that we are now in, the first name for it was Sunyata Dharma.
What does
but
that
now we
mean?
know it as natural law. Sunyata Dharma. Okay, so Dharma means, once again, many things, but Dharma means nature. So we already have natural law in that. So Dharma means nature. And then Sunyata Dharma basically means like the largest nature, the most core nature.
Right.
That's a rough translation.
Yeah. And we might also know about it with the name, the golden rule, essentially. Yeah. Like if you tie it into its core, it's like, don't do unto others what you wouldn't have wanted to be done unto you. One thing that really stood out there for me when you were explaining natural law in other videos is you have to be very responsible for your actions, but also your non-actions. And that the actions that we don't take, our non-actions, can cause just as much harm as taking harmful actions. How is that so?
Yeah, so that's the detriment of passivity. So passivity has a very high expression, positive expression. And then passivity has a very detrimental expression. Just like everything, it has a positive and a negative pole. And so when we are in passivity in its negative expression rather than its positive expression is we receive, we surrender. So many beautiful things come from, we manifest, so many things come from positive passivity, but the negative passivity is when we are actively a coward, actively turning a blind eye, actively not aligning with correct action, even though we know better, or actively lie to ourselves so that we can go into a lower state of consciousness and therefore go into separation because we feel like we can't, we feel like it would be too much in whatever way that means to somebody. Too much to do something, too much to take a correct action.
It gives a lot of food for thought as well, because, you know, as I was listening to that, it makes you also think about the ways in your life where maybe you're not taking action, being like, oh, that's not something I should be involved in. But just by you having awareness over it, it means you can take in sovereign action onto that and change whatever you're seeing that you don't like. Before this call, I know you won't have a problem with me saying this, but you told me I don't want to be known as the timeline chick, you know, like as we were joking. But that you're really focused on, you know, there's these issues in the outer world that you're seeing that you don't necessarily resonate with, that you feel called, that's a call for you to, you know, do something about that. How did that tie into your knowledge around natural law and wanting to maybe change these things and these systemic things in the world that we're seeing that we might feel powerless over? That, oh, like I can't change the whole economic system, like I'm just one person. You get where I'm going in that sense of, like, we might feel small in the face of these larger issues, but we're still seeing them. So what can we do about that?
Yeah. When I first had met natural law proper, let's call it, in this lifetime, I was relieved, because then it gave me permission to already be myself and do what I was already doing. Before, it was cringe when you care, because, you know, like, you're passionate. And when you're passionate in a world, especially when you're younger and you're passionate, and so everybody's still very locked into their third dimensional self-concept, it looks weird. You feel weird because you feel like you're bearing your soul, and you feel like you're too intense. And so it gave me permission to just be intense, because that's not really something that I could change about myself. And so I went like, oh, see, look, you have to be a spiritual activist, because so it just was a giant permission slip that I was I was right on track for my life. And so how I see this playing out inside the larger world is where we follow our own passion, whatever those actions are. Because let me tell you one thing, it's easier for me to come here and say to people, yeah, you have to take right action. But we don't really know what right action is. And what we take the action for in one stage of our life, we might look back 5, 10, 20 years later and say, oh my God, like I lent more of my action to evil. So because of that, we take the actions that we feel we're most aligned with, while knowing that we'll expand and we'll look back and say, that was the best I was doing at that time. And now this is what I feel is the best actions. And that doesn't mean that we were ever, that what I said about evil was a joke. That doesn't mean that we ever didn't need to take an action, because how do we know unless we do something? We can't deprive ourselves of those lessons. So we do the best we can. We might feel called right now to take actions in a certain way, whatever that is for somebody. But we have to stay open to maybe that there's a larger calling and then an even more aligned action. And so to go back to how I was talking about rites of passage earlier, and how you had mentioned that about like, what are the rites of passage? One of them is that you will be replaced in whatever role you are taking. So do not feel the pressure to not expand and evolve into your next role, because it is law that someone will come to fill that spot. And when we deprive where we feel called to serve next, that helps nobody, not even the one who will receive that spot that they get magnetized and called into. And so because of that, if we just allow ourselves to know while we're taking actions that we stay open to maybe moving into what we now see are better actions, ones that serve all at a better way, whatever better means for somebody. And that's ego deaths, right? those necessarily aren't fun, but I mean, I think it's fun now, right? Because you do it so many times that you just go like, you just tuck and roll. You just fall off the horse gracefully. You go on the sword gracefully. You know, if you go with the energies, it's not as hard as then like, oh, it needs to be a dark night of the soul. You just go like, oh, I'm expanding again. And so what that has led me into personally is going, okay, maybe spiritual activism isn't going to get through the way that I want to maybe, like larger, calcified forces, let's call them. So I'm learning in my own way how to really transmute and to alchemize things at my level of consciousness that I'm at now.
It's also a huge permission slip, because if you feel like you've just been going through the motions at something that you're perhaps already very good at because you've been doing it for so long, to expand that and knowing like the universe will never leave like something that was meant to happen like just blank and no one else will do it. Like the fact that you mentioned how someone will replace you, obviously never in the same coloring and texture that we do it with, but it's a permission slip to say yes to that higher evolution. So super powerful that you just mentioned there. You brought up the calcified forces. I also did want to speak on and touch on the subtle manipulations and those unseen forces that you call the predictive programming that is around us, because part of natural law is the free will, and that you can't take another person's free will. So when we see, things that we don't like going on in the world, and we say, but how did that person agree to that? Maybe they did it through these covert strategies that were used to get to them in different ways. And you highlight those very clearly. I love to just give a space to sort of express how we can still say yes by not deliberately saying yes to something that maybe isn't in our highest alignment.
Yeah. So before this age, we weren't very emotionally intelligent. And that's nothing that I'm just saying it as it is. There's nothing, we're babies, we're growing. So we had mastered other things, but not emotional intelligence. And so imagine forces that know a person's emotional body and their energy field more than they know them. You can work their hemispheres, you could work their sense of reality and manipulate their perceptions, even easy, dare I say, if a person doesn't start off knowing anything about themselves. And so what we're really learning in this age, which I love, is like the nervous system. And we're learning about like, oh, these types of energy centers, even combined with, these types of the higher mind or hormone production. We're learning all about ourselves now at a bodily level, from our organs, our glands, our nervous system, our brain. And so we're understanding the limbic warfare that goes on with like, oh, okay, they can get me caught in a trauma mind control loop if they're showing me that, or if they're manipulating me in this way, or through repetition. Repetition is a strong way. You repeat something through enough sources, and that repetition will shape the motherboard of your nervous system and your subconscious, so that you are, without even your own awareness, contributing your free will into these creations, these mass timelines that are being created. And so because of that, we're really understanding the way that we respond to things or react to things, the way that things are being presented to us. I saw the funniest thing the other day. I don't know why it came up on my feed, but maybe it was to share this story. I saw this like 10-minute clip of how the person who had ran McDonald's, the founder, was not the original founder, but he like tricked the original founders out of it. And he he was like doing this one interview, and he said like the funniest things. And I was like, that would never pass in this age. He was like, well, people like McDonald's because it digests greatly, so it's healthy for them, and so people like healthy food. Like, he was just saying something very like, in this age, no one would believe you. And this is the progress we're making. People can't just pull one over on the collective now. And so because of that, we're emotionally more mature. We know ourselves more. We still have a lot to go, to bring in that more higher dimensional consciousness, but we're on track. And so all of that has to do with the fact that we are becoming spiritually sovereign, meaning that we know that on the most subtle layers that we are consenting or non-consenting to things, and we are now giving our power and our sovereignty to the things that we want to create, and understanding that even when we're against something, it's good to be aware of that, but to also know that we can't create from that same energetic playing field. So we're just learning spiritual sovereignty by all of these different ways that the predictive programming has been broadcasting literally their spells. We have caught up to that now, I would say.
In what ways has your discernment helped you avoid a negative timeline that you could have taken?
Actually, yeah. It's trusting my clairsentience at this point, because I'm claircognizant, but my sentience at this point will really get louder. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to just trust my sentience now as a point of stronger discernment than how I'm usually used to. My discernment usually comes invisibly. And I'm always still learning discernment as well. But I would say that that discernment is something that I do pay attention to, and I do cultivate. And so because of that, I'm used to discernment being my main way of operating, or at least knowing how to, where those gaps are, to help fill them in and become better at discernment. And so what I have noticed is that discernment will start communicating to us on different levels, depending, like the more we evolve, the more discernment even expresses itself in its field. So how it's helped me is when there's just certain people, places, or things that now my physical, visceral sentience is coming online to either say, this is beneficial or this is non-beneficial. And then I'm just kind of surrendering into that, because that's a form of discernment that I'm not really used to operating in.
What's coming to me is that we're a lot more powerful than we think. And the reason that came up was because, for example, there are these predictive programming forces. A lot of them are in the form of media outlets and popular, movies and shows and things like that. And you and I both were working a lot with higher level concepts and consciousness, like throughout our work day, especially. And we all have our grounding tools of choice. Like for me, it's exercise, nature, and sometimes it's reality TV. And I came to the awareness the other day that what I was watching, it was like very subtly manipulating me into making these behaviors and actions normalized. And what I said was like, okay, like maybe I could take a step away from this show and like I'm not going to watch anymore. And I did that for a while, but I also realized there's a powerful opportunity here, because we also bring in these codes and healing energies to do grid work on these systems. And so I still can watch a show. I can make a declaration, which we'll talk about what that is, before I watch it, and still also send healing frequency to maybe transmute or alchemize some energy in that particular system. So a lot of us might be like, oh, I'm abandoning this food, this show, that show. Like, I don't want anything to do with it. And that's completely okay. Like, that's completely amazing. But what are your thoughts on maybe staying with it in the face of it, and in a sense allowing our energy and power to help transmute and alchemize as the alchemist that you are yourself. I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Of course, it's just a thought that came to mind.
Well, the idea of you being inspired by that means that there's something there, because that's not where I want to place my energy. So where we do that, like where we do that means that there's something there, especially someone like yourself. Like I feel like you know what you're doing at a subconscious level. So I would say go with it. Because that's really cool that a person, you know, like you feels called to really like experiment there. There's something there then. I would say like break the morphic field, shift the template, alchemize the things that are broadcasting that. That would be that. That's amazing. And I totally believe that that can be done. For me, I do that in my own way, just with grounding. Was that the question? Yeah, I dance. I'm even thinking about maybe even taking a dance class, but I don't know if I want to bring it that deep. But I'm actually a really good dancer, so I've been dancing.
I saw a video of you. You got some moves, sir. You got some moves.
Yeah, and so like for me, the groundingness of that is really just the movement. When I'm moving energy like that, that's totally grounding for me. Because as you know, I'm claircognizant, and as you know, like I deal a lot more with the higher mind. And so I'm not necessarily anchored in this reality the way that maybe other people are. And I'm not attached the way that normally I find out about things like a year later. I'm like, no way that happened. And they're like, don't make a post about that. That's old.
Old news.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm so mad. So grounding is definitely done through like the dancing and the movement. I think that that's very shamanic.
For sure. And when it comes to these, you mentioned trauma-based mind control that bring us out of our neocortex, our, you know, probably our higher reasoning. There are ways to counteract these forces, and I wanted to, in a way, highlight some of those that you mentioned. I brought up declarations, which is one that you teach, but to go really deep into that, because it does help us to stay in our spiritual sovereignty when we know and we're aware of these, and we're not just operating from ignorance in that sense. And that's why I really wanted to bring this up.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, oh, you want to alchemize the TV shows? Go for it. It's because that, like, I heard that about some of the apps that we're on too. Like, people want to like put their own frequencies into that, and I'm like, yes, this is how, you know, we shift things. We experiment and go, what if I wanted to do that and stuff? And like, that is the best state to be in, because declarations work the best when a person is not in fear while they're making them. When they're going like, wait, what if I wanted to do this? Like, do you see how that's a far
like a
more
child.
empowering? Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you see how that's not scared? That's like just inquisitive and open. That's a very powerful energy to be in. And so if a person's in that state of like, nah, that's not as powerful, I bet you I could do this instead, while they're doing a declaration, that is enhanced, because declarations are very important for us to be in our sovereignty. But they're more like, once you're really in your sovereignty, they're more just like, I'm going to do that for safety. They're not like, I do, you know, like you have to like fully command it and fully whatever. They're more just like, in my day, I'll be driving or I'll be talking to someone, or I'll be even in a space and I could feel the radionics, you know, like when I'm out somewhere, I can sense if a place, I'm sure many people can, but I can sense the radionics. And so then I'm like, and then I say a declaration to neutralize that energy. And then sometimes I'll even have like my Blu-ray angels around me if the place or whatever is like super intense, but that's rare. So the declarations are there at a certain point of our own journey, but they're not like the shield defending us because we're sovereign enough. And so they're just there because we've become lawyers at a certain point. And we know, we're like, oh, I see what that's doing, and I rewrite that, I recode that. So the declarations are very important. I would say what empowers them is, as I said, being in an open and inquisitive way, because that is just charging it.
Yeah, I also, to a point, you just shed these maybe notions of, I need like this protection and shielding, and and probably about a year ago, I would, every time I leave the house, the shield, the thing, the the color, the violet, the gray, and then just at a certain point, you're like, your vibration in itself is what is keeping you away from maybe other vibrations that are unmatched to that. And the more aware you are of your own vibration and your own inner unity and harmony, then, all those other stuff are extras and nice to haves, and probably wastes of times at some point when you're like, sage, shield, the color, the gold, the purple, you know what I'm saying?
And I don't want to bash or put those down. It's just that when, like how I said earlier, if we're charged with inquisitiveness while going up against broadcasting, if we want to infuse and charge things back into strong systems of like very advanced types of spiritual gridding, then inquisitiveness would be the best energy to harmonize that first. Just like that, the law of one is what harmonizes and charges our protection. So if we're doing all of that and we haven't cultivated the inner standing that we are all one, the inner standing of whatever it means to a person, because like I said, there's so many different layers to law of one, but we don't need to get super cerebral about that. Life will connect us with whatever lessons or curriculum that we need to at that time. And so we can just focus on that and then consider that like, yeah, I'm embodying the law of one through this right now. And then that will grow, and then we'll learn more. But however that presents to somebody, and it will present to everyone. So however a person is learning the law of one and embodying that will be what charges whatever things that they are doing to protect themselves. And then what they might find is that the more that they are inner embodying and radiating and even illuminating the law of one from their energy field, that is doing a lot of the protection for them. And so they can still do things. Protection is too delicate and nuanced of a topic to just throw everything in one category or the other. And what I would even say is that when we throw protection into one category where we need it a lot and we rely heavily on it, or the other category where we don't need it at all, I would call those polarities the false light. So I would just bridge those into the middle way, which is saying that whatever a person feels or resonates with doing for protection at a time, do as thou wilt. Just know that it is not as strong and it cannot protect you from the law of one. So to embody the law of one is to already not need as much. And then from there, protect away. I have protection. But what I've noticed is, especially for people who are visible and who are speaking change into the world and touching people's minds and hearts, it would be very irresponsible of me to say, oh yeah, no, you're fine. You don't need any protection, because literally just like the radionics inside a store goes off, we can start going into some form of separation consciousness. So protection, I feel like personally, I might grow out of this one day, but at the moment, I feel like we're all fine with whatever we do for protection, and that's very responsible, but that it's not the end all be all if we're not embodying the law of one. And that maybe at even a certain point in human evolution, it might be something of the past.
Beautiful. I also wanted to ask you, what has been your greatest understanding about the law of one specifically?
Ooh. It is it gets Shakespearean. My greatest understanding would be the one that pulls at my heart the most, which is to know that unconditional love could love to such a degree that it will allow you to suffer or anything to suffer, because that's how much it honors you as sovereign, even if you're in a state of spiritual amnesia to your own sovereignty. And that's very poetic.
Extremely. And that changes the notion of what suffering is completely. So when you're going through periods of suffering and when you see the collective suffering, how do you then perceive those moments as well?
So I switch polarities. If unconditional love is so allowing, then it needs its arms and its hands and its eyes and its mouth, because it's not embodied. So that unconditional love and force will work through us. But when it works through us, it won't show up necessarily as the same version. It might show up in the active polarity rather than just the one, oh, I will let you suffer. And so how I do that is basically through action. But there's always a dance, just like, to separate and unify again at a higher level. You're always learning between love as action and love as non-action, because both are valid, and it really just depends on our lessons and our discernment to understand which one is called for at that time. But usually I will say that it's some form of action, because we're here with arms and legs. So that's a little clue that we're allowed and we're meant to take actions. And so those actions, are going to be different for everyone. So not everyone needs to take the same actions. When I say action, it might kind of like sound like we have to have some sort of call to action. I don't have a specific call to action for everyone. It's just the person's soul's call to action for whatever they feel is contributing to the higher consciousness of our collective.
Who are the petty tyrants?
Okay, so the petty tyrants is a Castaneda phrase. So Carlos Castaneda created a shaman, Don Juan, and he used teachings through the literary device or through the character of Don Juan to go give teachings. And so at a point, he's brought in the teachings through Don Juan, his character that he wrote, about teaching about the petty tyrants. And it was a way to really alchemize the attacks and even just the things that are meant to take us out of our power, to chip away at our power, to diminish us. And it's a great way to alchemize it if you no longer look at it as so powerful that, oh my God, they're against us. Because that can really set a tone that makes us view things as more powerful than they really are. Instead, it's like a petty tyrant. It's not even a tyrant. It's a petty tyrant, like somebody who's in a position of possibly very little to no power. And when we look at it that way, now that completely alchemizes the situation to where we're not looking at it like, wow, you're this large tyrant that is opposing me. Instead, it's, wow, you're a part of this archetypal character that will always escort me into my next level of myself. So it will show up in like different ways. They help enhance the reflection of yourself. But when I say enhance, that could even mean distort it, right? Like they could, how those like characterizations of like those drawings where like your features are exaggerated for satire.
Yeah.
They can give you back things, and that does not necessarily mean that any of it's accurate. That could just be sheer projection. However, the point is that depending on how much clarity, because I'm not saying that none of the petty tyrants none of them can offer something. I'm just saying that what we're learning is to see ourselves in a very distorted mirror, kind of like you go into like a hall of mirrors. And that way you look around, and the petty tyrants are meant to kind of like reflect back to distortions of yourself. But within those distortions, you can still gain something. So it's almost like the alchemy of it is, imagine you inside a very distorted mirror, you know, those like funhouse mirrors?
Yeah.
But what if that funhouse mirror needed to shape you so crazy? Because when you go, what? And you look into that, there's like this one dimension from under your nose, and you're like, I would have never seen my nose like that. And so like, and maybe the funhouse mirror is showing you how tall your forehead is, and you look all crazy, but that's not even what you're focused on. You're like, why is my nose like that? That nose like that is how I could describe the petty tyrants. They're showing you like really distorted versions of yourself, not so you could go, look at how bad you are, accept them, but instead to go, I would have never had this aspect of me seen in this light before, and that might benefit my awareness, or that might just be something that now I need to completely own, that somebody sees that, and I have to make peace with the fact that I have no control over how somebody sees me like that. Because a large part of the journey too is being misunderstood. And if we're constantly
100%.
Yeah, if we're constantly defending ourselves, we have no energy left to just allow people to perceive ourselves however they want to, or they do, and continue to put our energy in whatever we're doing.
What would we call those reflections that give back to us not distortions, but maybe show us the best aspects of ourselves, maybe the inherent gifts and the magic that we hold and we express? What would we call those mirrors and those reflections?
I would call them soulmates.
Oh, wow.
I definitely see that as and yes, there's always benefits in seeing the distortions in ourselves. And so we could always say that, well, who loves you more, the tough love? But at the end of the day, there's different energies, and those energies can be defined into terms. And so when somebody sees you in your harmony, that's a soulmate. And then from there, it's not like they're in some sort of fawn response. Soulmates aren't faking it. They don't need to see that about you. They do naturally. There's less distortion. So when there's less distortion, it's because it's not even a cerebral thing. They just know you. You're a soulmate, so they just know you. They see you without the distortions.
Is everyone that we come across meant to show us a mirror of ourselves? Or are there just some background characters that are just in a way filling spots in our reality? Maybe they have their own realities and their own soulmates and their own tyrants. But yeah, that's something that I've wondered, because, for example, I can go to the groceries and there's so many people there, but I don't interact with everyone there. And I'm wondering, because you talked about this before, how you see that in the sense of the mirrors that we are talking about here, that reflect our good parts, our bad parts, our shadow selves, and all these other aspects of who we are.
Yeah, and we're also NPCs in other people's stories too. I remember somebody came into a small health food store that I was in, and they just came up to me and they asked me something, and I felt like I was an NPC activated in their story. And I was like, what does spirit want me to give this main character on their quest right now? And so I was like, I showed them, I pointed to the thing. I said something weird because I have to be weird. Cause I just think if the universe sent them to me, then they want me to be weird. So I just did something weird. And then I was unactivated and I went back to being an NPC. So we're also NPCs in other people's stories as well.
What is a NPC, just for definition purposes?
a non-player character. It's when you're not the main character of a story or a game. So a non-player character is like you're not the main character. And so, yeah, I would not necessarily call every single person who we interact with or see inside our reality as necessarily like they're meant to serve as a mirror. They can. And there's parts of our journey where we'll go into certain practices. I remember I went into a practice for like 6 months of just like smiling at everyone. And then I went into 6 months of not just being normal. But I just go into these different like little side quests just for character development. Just, so there's parts of our journey where maybe we will want to make that a fun experiment or a practice where every single person that we see in our reality means some sort of reflection to us and to figure that out. But for me, I would say, while I'm off the clock on that I don't necessarily perceive that. I think that it's the people who, I think it's the supporting roles, shall we say, in everybody's main character story. Everyone's the main character of their own path and timeline. And it's the people who we interact with and pay attention to and are in some way connected to us that are those reflections.
I've always asked myself that, like, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, of why do you feel the creator would have it that way to make everyone have their own main character energy in their own game and bring that main story back to source wherever we go after this lifetime? Why would the creator create it in that way, if that makes sense?
Everything you say makes sense.
Brain farting out here. It's the full moon, like
we're speaking full moon. So everything is a reference point. And, to us, we value, safety, security. And that's fine. So we value things. Imagine the real currency of the eternal is reference points. So rather than necessarily like, because Source doesn't care about a car. So Source doesn't need those things, but man, would Source love to see itself in the reference point of a main character who is just getting a new car and they're excited about that. Or whatever it is, or who just, we could bring it Shakespeare. I went to car, but, it could be like, wow, some sort of, I love about Shakespeare, all of the different storylines. They were so convoluted, but they made sense because they were all speaking to the core parts of our human experience. And that's why they were so convoluted. They were always like, wait, what? Because that's life. And that's what Source really deeply craves. It's those reference points and even how unique and complex they are,
The peak reference points is what's coming to me are emotions, because you mentioned that example of like, it doesn't care if you got the car, but it likes to see itself in your excitement, an emotion, or a state of peak expression in the human experience, which is excitement. But there's also sadness, there's also grief, there's also joy. Let me check in with my inside out. What other emotions are out there? Nostalgia. But like, what I'm trying to say is, what do those human emotions do for the creator, and why it likes to see itself in? Because I know that those that have connected with extraterrestrial beings say that they don't necessarily have the same emotional capabilities that we do as humans. So I'm wondering what the uniqueness is there for the creator and its relationship with us and to us.
Yeah, it's for our folly. Humans are quite human. We, I don't know if you've noticed this, but humans are hilarious. Like hilarious. There's many things, if I wanted to be really critical right now of humanity, that I have a list. I have a list of demands, but
scroll through the list.
Yeah. But I also have a list of positives, and the list of positives on the top is I am so impressed with how funny humans are. We are so creatively funny. And
or try to be.
Yeah, we're trying to be, but like we're able to laugh at how futile we are, but in all these different ways of how futile. And so it's like folly, like we're constantly able to fall on our sword, which is very vulnerable. It's very vulnerable to, I tried to convey this inside my video on the sacred clown. In there, I felt like, cause for me, some of the topics I cover, I go like, I really care about and I want to present. And so in that, I had presented the Hayoka empath, the sacred clown. And I was like, you have to fall on your sword this episode. If you don't, you will not do this episode justice. And so I made a joke in there about something that was, quite vulnerable. It was like, yeah, humans have to go to the bathroom. We had to like get over that. And we never, like I pretended that everyone had this problem, but not me, when I was the one who had the problem. And so, but that's falling on your sword. And what I'm so impressed with is how much humans can be vulnerable enough for the joke, for the punchline. And so I just like, I think that that's brave. I think that that's hilarious. I think that's the added factor, that je ne sais quoi that brings up amusement. Because what is amusement? To me, when I was making that Sacred Clown episode, I had downloaded that amusement actually is all of the states of consciousness meeting. We don't really think of why we find something funny, but that it's because the lower levels of consciousness and the higher, all of that bandwidth are presented. And what we get from that culmination is like what arises is amusement. And so it's very vulnerable to be in a state of so aware of your futility while also keeping like a higher vantage point or a higher understanding. And so because of that, I think that's why the paradox is that it's funnier the more that it's vulnerable or truthful.
It also explains a lot of plant medicine journeys and experiences, because like at the end of those, all you can do is just laugh hysterically at your existence, because you just saw a glimpse of a lot of reality that you didn't perceive before. And then all of a sudden you're back and you're human and you fart and you do all these things and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Anyway, on another note, we talked about a year ago, and I asked you sort of what you felt humanity was learning in that year. And you told me that we're learning how to use technology responsibly. Obviously, in a year, our technological expansion with especially AI has been exponential, been increased tremendously. So where do you feel we are at with that now, especially going into 2026, a new year? I feel like these episodes will also be time markers for where was humanity back then when they were doing that stuff. But how do you perceive where we're at with using technology responsibly?
Yeah, I really hope this ages well. I think it's going to go in the timelines. So I think that the higher timelines, the higher frequency creations are going to create AI more responsibly, more heart-centered. And that the lower timelines are going to repeat the human karma, which is abusing and infusing technology with service to self. Or even just kind of like, because I don't want to make it sound like we invented these technologies. Instead, it's more like our own relationship and our own connection to them. Are we infusing this ancient knowledge? AI is ancient. Are we infusing this ancient tech with the same karma of service to self or abuse of power? That's another way of saying service to self is abusing power. Or are we going to infuse this technology through more of the organic timelines or organic ascension timelines? And that would be where the technology is infused with our intention, and our intention is coming from for the well-being of all and for the well-being of Gaia, the planet, and for the well-being of all beings on it, all creatures on it. So really having that higher perception, once we start infusing everything with like, oh, I'm not just thinking about myself, or, oh, I'm not even just thinking about my group. Oh, I'm not just even thinking about humans, but start really infusing technology with for the well-being of all, for the planet, and then get from there, going on. But that's how we'll be able to really choose, because both timelines, and there's more than one, but I'm just making them sound, for the sake of ease, I'm making them sound like two options, two timelines. The lower timeline will continue the karmic cycle of abusing technology and abusing power. And the higher timelines are going to actually incorporate and infuse technology and AI with that organic and heart-centered intention and willpower for the well-being of all.
When it comes to, because you mentioned AI is ancient, going back to those mystery schools back in ancient Chem, Atlantis, the real ancient civilizations, do you, in a way, know or remember how they would utilize technology for their spiritual initiations? Or would they even bring those two together at all? Or they had, their technology here and that separate over there? How do you perceive how that worked in a sense?
Yeah, so there was technologies, but we actually had a stronger spiritual connection. So we were aware of our own inner technologies. An outer technology from that time period was the Ankh. The Ankh was actually an organic technology.
Organic?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So so the Ankh is the representation of masculine and feminine energies. The cross is a distortion of the Ankh. The cross was purposely distorted to create dissection of the mind and heart and to lock us into the third dimensional mind. The Ankh, actually the circular part of it represents the feminine womb. And so it was organic technology that helped a person actually with many things, depending on what it was. And it was sound-based. So a lot of the technologies, which we're now, I'm not saying to the degree of the past, but we're now learning, just not at the same level yet, is sound, light. These are organic technologies. Water is a very powerful, even fire, and it's higher forms of light, which is, so I said light again. So those are all organic technologies. There's even things beyond that. But so the Ankh was one of the external technologies of that time. The inner would be our body. Our body is literally technology. And so because of that, our body can do a lot of the things that we would need technology to do, but we don't need technology to do that. And so organic technologies moving forward, or organic AI, all of that stuff, we can't ever just, when we look back in the past, we can change things at a higher density or at a higher dimension. But here, right now, in this form, we always have to incorporate whatever happened in the past. So we can't be anti-AI or anti-technology at the moment because that happened. So we're going against the will. What we can do is curve it, alchemize it, become more conscious, become more aware. We can transmute it. So we transmute it, and then that's how we're literally becoming the alchemist of using these technologies in a service to all way. But what you'll also see is that they vastly differ from the lower timelines. The lower timelines are dependent on AI and technology, and eventually they will even merge into cyborgs. They won't even become human anymore. They will lose the rite of passage of being a human. The higher timelines are simply just having technology be an external extension of their balance. Like it will help them. It will be done in a way to where it's so harmonious, it will help us evolve.
I had a almost 2-hour conversation yesterday with an expert on plasma, and she's expanding the definition of plasma beyond just the scientific definition that we have for it, equating it to this field, almost like what the ancients would call the ki or the chi or the prana, the ether. And I know ether is very tied to alchemy. And I wanted to understand if, in your perspective, that, I guess, fourth state of matter, as the scientists would call it, is part of the organic tech that we're going to see in the future, and how that might relate to ether as the alchemists knew it back in the day.
Absolutely. So the alchemists knew it as ether, but also it's like, so what plasma is, and now this is like from an esoteric sense, not however science will tell you this, but from an esoteric sense, plasma could be looked at as the substrat. So it's a substrat of spirit. So in alchemy, or just, in Gnostic thought, alchemical thought, I'll just say Western esoterica, what you have is like this spiritual light. And this spiritual light you could call the first substance to create from. From that first substance of spiritual light to create from, they call that many different names. The more important something is, the more names it has. But this this first spiritual light then goes into a form that now we can turn into like a universe, and that would be plasma. So plasma is like the primordial substrat of spirit. It's how to create things into matter. And what would be like above that is that first spiritual light that I was talking about, that then goes down in density. It would be plasma. It then goes down, and then you have the densities until you get into solid form. What was the question?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a futuristic view of what would happen when humanity at large chooses a timeline where we know how to utilize this prima materia, this ether energy, into then building our, you call them, I think it's like new earth systems, or a lot of people are calling them nowadays, but almost taking a futuristic lens of what would happen, and almost imagine those realities, because they're not so far away, but we're not there yet. And I think bridging that is a really powerful way to imagine these realities and inspire the builders and the architects to imagine new realities.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, like with ether, that's how we will be able to create more, like 0 point energy.
Yeah.
That's ether. That's just another term for ether. So the more we become aware of that, like that is a perfect example of new earth technology. It's harnessing the ether. And we can start doing that simply by making sure that we get some of the first morning sunlight. And I think that that's popular now for people to say in the biohacking field now, that they're saying that that's actually being able to not just help our body with syncing up to the circadian rhythm and our endocrine system, that's literally at a spiritual level helping us bring in more ether and creating more coherence in our field on its own.
I asked you last time about the activation of our light body, and you told me that you were very impressed that the evolutionary leap that's been going on for the last 2.5 years is like more accelerated than we could have anticipated. So I guess an update to that would be, where are we in those activations of our light body, and what does that really mean for our evolution as a human race, as a species?
Yeah, so it jumped again really big this year. So, it's I think by 2030 we would even be just really a completely different human. The way that we operate, we'll be far more telepathic, we'll be far more in coherence, even more effortlessly in coherence. Right now what we're seeing is different stages of the alchemical process, but they're all pretty kind of still impressive where they are, at least for me when I'm viewing it, because people who are in the state of disillusionment, when they're going through that alchemical stage of disillusionment, what I see is far less resistance. So people can move through things quicker into a different stage of their own evolution. For people who are not necessarily needing strong lessons in disillusion, but maybe are now, like you said, like activating their light body, that's happening from last year when we spoke, even at a quicker rate. And so I just see the timelines actually getting kind of like in an accelerated mode. And then that's why we're feeling such intense energies that sometimes even feel ungrounding, but it doesn't like necessarily mean in a negative way. It could be, but it just feels like really ungrounded. It's because of how much of the energies and the codes of remembering that we're getting. And so those codes of remembrance are really what's allowing us to help form our light body at a faster rate as well. But then when we bring our intention into that and we start going into the organic world, because like dimensions are something funny because there's many different definitions for them and they mean more than one thing. But really, if you think about it, the more we get a bunch of electrical inputs and the more we're indoors and the more that we're all these things, that will literally put our consciousness will entrain into that frequency, and we will be in a completely different dimension. Therefore, if we just go outside, we get first morning sunlight, we're in nature, and that's bringing, even to a person's own timeline or their own experience, a completely different realm. And their consciousness is in training with more organic sources of energy and creative power. So because of that, I like the light body, I see actually very active in a lot of people, which is interesting because when I was learning about the light body, it was something that you don't go in and out of. You actually, like, once you go into the light body, you leave this reality. Like it's a basically your ascension vehicle. It's like the light body takes over from there. And then even in ancient traditions, there was the rainbow body, and the rainbow body, all you would see left after like a master was meditating to the point where they levitate and then they just like disintegrate. So all you see left is like the remains of their body, but they had transcended. They had gone into the rainbow body, which was another term for the light body. So the light body itself is this interesting concept because it's not something where it's like, yeah, you got your light body activated. And then, but I am still seeing enough luminous in the person's energy field to where it's like, I'm reconciling worlds here with concepts. The light body is something that at this point, I feel like it could be turned on. It could be activated to a degree. And so I would feel like it's in stages. And so a person's light body doesn't mean that it's like final, like, oh, it's my light body. Like there could come a time when that light body's literally, because you don't leave to the next density. Your light body does. After you've gone through the alchemical process to its completion here. And so I feel like we're going to live in an enlightened state. And that enlightened state is going to be not fully physical, the way that we know physicality and the way we are, but not fully of such a high energy that it does not vibrate into solid form at all. It's going to be like this in between, which is very fourth density.
A lot of people are calling that transition from Homo sapien into Homo luminous, which is interesting. You use that term to describe it, and in the energy field, and we're becoming more lighter density in that way. When it comes to timelines, because you're the timeline chick.
Wow.
What would happen? I mean, obviously it would be incredible if we all just activated that light body. We've been doing that spiritual work, and we become these Homo luminous beings living in a higher dimension. But what about those that maybe are in resistance to that field and to that's unfolding? Is the evolution inevitable? Can a certain section of a species resist the evolution? I'm really curious of how that works. Obviously, this gets into like biology and science and evolutionary biology, and I'm not an expert in that, and I'm just the podcast dude, and you're the timeline chick, but we're trying to make sense of all of this.
Well, I took biology in college.
Okay.
And I left after day 4. I know all of this. Just kidding. Yeah, the idea of evolution already implies not everyone. And I know that sounds savage, but like that, this is esoterica. Esoterica is savage. So that's what evolution is by any definition. There was never groups, like the Mayans, like they had evolved together, but like they were still just a group of humanity. So evolution is done through it's almost unheard of that everything evolves from a thing. Is it impossible? No. When I'm saying this, I don't need everyone to I don't need everyone to evolve, and I don't need everyone to not evolve. Like I don't need to say this in a way where I'm invested. If everyone evolves, great, because I would love that. But how evolution goes is that some people evolve, and that's how things evolve. It's because some did. So some choose with their free will to become conscious, to go through the rites of passage, to embody whatever that higher frequency is, and that's known as an ego death. And I know that we kind of have resistance to that term ego death in this age simply because we've abused it. We have abused the term ego death from past ages. We made it mean all sorts of things, like we needed to avoid our humanity, we needed to avoid our emotions and bypass. But actually, I don't know a better term for it. It's a ego death. When you evolve, you have to give up the level of consciousness you were operating on, and go to a higher level of consciousness. So not everyone wants to do that. And because of that, not everyone will evolve. But if everyone does choose to do that, great, more power to them.
I don't know if they got to this on day 4 of the biology class, but if I remember correctly, there was some research done. Guys, do your own research. I'm just speaking out loud here, where the previous, version of the Homo sapien, or even like the Neanderthals, were still around while the Homo sapien was around, and that they did have interaction. And there's also movies like the X-Men where you have the mutants living alongside the humans at the time, and they were in war with each other for a while, and then they finally learned how to live amongst each other and in harmony. So that could be, I don't know, a potential of, but when it comes to the children that are being born right now, how are you perceiving the ones? Because I think you said in the last podcast, you look at a baby's eyes nowadays and it's like incredible. It's like, wow, like a breathtaking experience because of the energy they're holding.
Yeah. So the children that are coming in are already coming in with so much activated without needing to activate it. And so they're really representing like the telepathic human, like the things that we're getting upgrades for. They're coming in and they're experiencing, they're still fine tuning. There's still a lot of fine tuning, but they're already coming in with one thing very enhanced. And what you'll notice is that that's usually what happens with an upgrade. It doesn't mean like, oh, everything's worked out perfectly. Instead, it'll be like some faculty or ability that is extraordinarily enhanced, even sometimes to the detriment of the other abilities, just because this one thing is the point to enhance and to bring forward until that like integrates into the collective. And so, yeah. And I said that. And then I found out after I gave my 2025 annual energy update, I said telepathy. And then I found out because people were leaving comments about the telepathy tapes. I did not know what that was. And so I was like, oh, okay. Well, I hope we still get the upgrades. I hope it didn't go to all the kids. No, I
all our kids just reading our minds now, and we're like on our phones, like trying to figure out ChatGPT. What are they saying?
Totally. So yeah, that's actually an organic technology, telepathy. So we have so much organic technology within us coming online.
And I'm seeing it real time. I told you last year I was in Egypt and I saw a lot of people on that trip just immediately get in real time upgrades and remembrances. I think the key word is remembrance, because it's not like we're downloading a new iOS. It's a lot of it is ancient. A lot of it has just been stored there. And if we are also thinning the veil to other lifetimes of mastery, then it would make sense that these upgrades can happen on a whim and super spontaneous. One day you wake up like Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys, and he was 3 days in a samadhi state and then birthed the Gene Keys out of himself with that download he had those 3 days. So, I mean, right now it's anything is possible at this point. I'm super optimistic about it.
Absolutely. Especially in Egypt, because the mystery schools in Egypt, they would go into darkness for like 9 days, and that would activate a lot of their psychic abilities.
The DMT.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they would go into, so they did a bunch of different mystery school practices. As you know, that's why people go to Egypt. It's to get those activations from what was taking place there and what the energy that's infused with there in Egypt. But it is all a spiritual initiation center. And one of the ways that the organic technology or our spiritual insights are coming online for the initiates was through going through darkness for large periods of times, or going through, it depends on what initiation, but going through silent retreats. So being quiet opens your third eye.
And that's my cue to end the podcast. No, Sarah, I could literally talk to you for hours. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and you're operating from such a heart center, and it's so refreshing to be in your energy. We end every show with a segment called The Final Trio, as we did last time. Before that, where would you send people to connect with you, with your work, with the new series that just came out on Gaia a few weeks ago? Where would you send people to find all of that?
Yeah, so right now my passion project is Mystery Teachings on Gaia. So if you guys would like to go see the first season, We just got done filming the second season, and I put heart and soul into both seasons, but I came up with the second season from scratch. So they're all topics for each episode that are not just powerful activations, but they mean a lot to me. And I'm so happy that Gaia will, will be able to produce them. So I would definitely say, first and foremost, to go check out Mystery Teachings on Gaia. And then after that, you could just go to my website, thealchemist.community. There I have all of my socials, and you could sign up for my newsletter.
Beautiful. We'll link everything in the show notes. I binge watched the first season, and it's really powerful. A lot of like condensed, packed information that I feel like is a transmission, is an activation, and I'm excited for the second one. And I know it means a lot to you, so excited for that. These last three questions are personalized to the guest, so to you. The first one I had for you is, what do you wish every soul would remember about why they came to Earth right now?
That they came here to fully just be their largest expression. And that what would you do at the end of your life when you turn around and see yourself right now in this present moment? You wouldn't care about like 90% of the stuff that you care about, and to just follow that elder within you.
Follow that elder within you. What teaching from the ancient mystery schools has become the core of your life? And it has to be different from the one we started with the Eros, because it's like a full circle, or it can be an expanded version of that teaching. But yeah, which one has become the core of your life?
Natural law. It's become the core of my life because I see how much humanity needs it for their own sovereignty, for our own sovereignty.
What is the most sacred thing that you've ever witnessed in another human being?
A singer sing. When they can just go into, first of all, the talent of singing is beyond me. I'm just like, I sing, but I love hearing a singer who is, talented naturally at that. I am impressed when they're just able to go into such a vulnerable, nonlinear state, like no one's watching, and to just go straight into singing from their soul.
I think it's the only art form that has had me cry real time from the awe of the experience. Like, I've cried because of basketball games, of course, NBA finals, when 2008 Lakers, Orlando Magic, that was a rough time. But when it comes to art forms, not a lot of art gets me that emotional than singing as well. So I completely resonate. I had the experience of being inside all three pyramids in one night, and we would just do these activations with our voice. And I was the only one in that group that couldn't sing, so I would just hum and But when I would hear a lot of these people that were on that trip, just especially in those resonance chambers, it was the best experience of my life. So any singers, guys, go to Egypt and sing in those, because that's what they were meant for in my perspective, like tone and sound and all these beautiful mystical things. So anyway, Sarah, it's always a pleasure to dive deep with you and connect, and just I think we added more of our personality and humor into this one, because we got to know each other quite well on the first conversation, and I just can't wait to keep going down these rabbit holes with you and exploring consciousness with you. So thank you again, and you're the perfect voice for all of these teachings, and I'm so excited that it's coming through right now, and I get the honor to receive that and listen to you. So thank you so much for your magic.
It's an honor. Thank you.